Welcome to Finding Sentences. In this section, we are interested in finding sentences. That is, we want to find the end of a sentence to basically group the text we're processing into a sentence unit effectively. This process is called sentence boundary disambiguation, and it can be a very important task. It is typically used in downstream processes such as determining the meaning of a particular portion of text. Before you determine the meaning, we often need to break it into units such as sentences to see exactly what's going on. In this section, we'll learn why the whole process is so hard. It turns out that just simply finding periods or using periods or exclamation marks or question marks to limit the end of a sentence is not all you need to do. There's a lot of other complications that can occur, and we'll look at those issues. We'll also learn how to use Java JDK techniques to perform the boundary detection. This works fine for simple sentences. More difficult cases may want to use some open source APIs to perform this analysis. Often these particular APIs have been trained on models for contemporary text. However, there are times when the text we're processing is fairly unique, in which case we need to learn how to train a model to handle the sentence boundary disambiguation in those instances. In the last video, we'll be looking at that very process. What makes SBD difficult? This particular video is concerned about how we find the end of a sentence. This is referred to as sentence boundary disambiguation. This can be a difficult task, and we'll be looking at in this video why it is difficult or can be difficult. In future videos, we'll look at different techniques for using software to find and isolate sentences. This particular task is important in many downstream NLP processes. For example, if we want to find the meaning of text, we often need to understand it in the context in which the text is organized. We as humans typically organize our text in terms of paragraphs and sentences. Sentences typically consist of or contain a single thought. And so if we want to analyze our text, we need to isolate these single sentences to get access to these ideas and these thoughts. The actual process of finding the end of a sentence is not as simple as simply finding the end of the sentence by using a period, question mark, exclamation mark. Those are fairly common techniques used in the English language. However, we can always assume that these, in fact, will demark the end of a sentence. Periods in particular can be difficult. In the following sentence, Dr. Jones, PhD, period, P period, weighs 79.38 kilograms, period, we find 6 periods being used. In this particular sentence, we find 5 periods being used, only one of which, the last one, is being used to mark the end of the sentence. We also find sentences embedded inside of sentences. This is perhaps not as common, but it is something that needs to be considered when you're trying to find the end of a sentence. In the sentence, he said, this is different, exclamation mark, to no one in particular, we find 2 sentences there. We really need to be able to separate these in many situations. So it turns out that this process of finding the end of a sentence is not always that simple. We are going to look in this particular video at the problems found with periods. This is really more commonly used, and is the typically more difficult part of finding the end of a sentence. And so we'll look at a number of situations here so that we have a better understanding of the problems that can occur when we try and find the end of a sentence. So they are used within abbreviations. We'll look at a couple of abbreviations shortly. They're used for numbers. We can use for basically floating point numbers. Used for ellipses, that's 3-dot sequences, and we can also find it used placed inside quotation marks. Each of these situations can present more challenges to any technology trying to find the end of a sentence. We'll be looking at each of these different situations a little more carefully to see exactly what's going on. So let's start with the periods and abbreviation. What we find is may or may not contain the periods. The link I have here, a stack exchange link, looking at a couple other examples, very similar examples. She worked for the FBI, F period, B period, I period, for over 23 years. We see here we use not only the periods in abbreviation, we also use the abbreviation at the end of the sentence. So the last period is used both as the termination of the sentence and as a termination of the abbreviation to confuse matters even more so. Periods and numbers. Well, we're going to find that periods will be appearing inside of floating point numbers. We also find sorted dates, so we'll see in a moment. And of course, they're used to determine our sentences. In the first sentence, his weight in kilograms is 85.57, but he is tall. We see the period being used there. Again, this can make it hard to find the end of a sentence if all we're looking for is periods. In the next example, we see the actual number being used to terminate the sentence. and we see a perhaps more confusing type of number, 85.57 point. But again, most readers will be able to identify that as a number and as in a sentence very easily. Software may have more difficult time with this task. Or in the last example, he was born 3.1.78. In some places, in some conventions, they'll use a period to limit the month, date, and year of a date. In this case, date of a birth, March 1st, 1978. So again, we find that periods in numbers or in dates can be difficult. Ellipses are fairly common. They may consist of nothing more than 3 periods in a row, or you may find a Unicode character being used for that particular purpose. In either case, it needs to be handled correctly. We may find these ellipses either within or at the end of sentences. In the first example, when in doubt, ... don't hesitate to ask, and we find it in the embedded sentence. In the next example, the minutes are dragged on and on, ... terminates the actual sentence. So again, this is how we may see them being used. And you may actually run across them inside brackets. In the case of days, open bracket, ... close brackets, are considered a holiday for some. Sometimes you may have additional material inside here to indicate which specific days or continuation of days, or perhaps a range of dates or range of numbers like 1.3 or 1.10. So we find ellipses used in many different situations, which if we treat them as simple periods, again would be a mistake when you're trying to find the end of sentence in most cases. Another problem area is in terms of quotation marks. In the first example, his last words were, "This looks easy," period. We have a sentence basically embedded inside another sentence. Both sentences are effectively ended by the period. So we have to be careful how we handle this. The other sentence, which is better F period, B period, I period, or FBI question mark, uses both question mark and a period term in the sentence. In this case, we're really asking a question, but again, notice the use of the periods inside of the quotation marks. We need to consider this when we analyze or trying to find the end of a sentence. So, having a better understanding of why sentence boundary disambiguation is difficult, we want to look at next at how we go about actually using software to find the end of a sentence. We as humans do not want to go through there and isolate each sentence one by one. We want to automate that process.